Tell me where your friends are heading now, and I'll let you go.
I had an idea to get to Lincoln's army.
All right, go on then.
This movie is based on a true story, and it begins in the year 1863. A man named Peter is working as a slave in the cotton fields, living with his wife Dodienne and their children. One day, he learns that he's been sold to a new master, and that men are coming to take him away. Before being separated, Peter kneels with his family to pray.
Lord is with me. I will not be afraid.
Soon, a group of white men arrive at his home.
Let's go.
His children try to argue and plead for their father, but the men ignore their cries and forcibly drag Peter away. Peter tries to resist. He struggles and fights, but one of the men points a gun at his wife's head.
Hey! No!
Left with no choice, Peter surrenders. They beat him and load him onto a cart, where other slaves are already seated. As the cart moves away, Peter's children run behind it.
I will come back to you!
After a long journey, they arrive at a railroad construction site. The conditions here are far worse than the cotton fields. The heads of slaves who once tried to escape are hung above the gate as a warning. The slaves are locked in cages at night. Despite their hard labor and obedience, the white overseers continue to beat, abuse, and humiliate them. Ferocious dogs are kept nearby, trained to hunt down any slave who dares to run. If a slave misbehaves, they are whipped brutally, or worse, branded with hot iron rods on the face. Sometimes, they're even shot dead in the middle of the field as an example. The man in charge of the site is named Fassel, and his two right-hand men are Harrington and Knowles. So, Peter tries to keep a low profile and behave well. But one day, when he helps his friend Gordon, who collapses from exhaustion, a guard starts yelling at him. That evening, as the slaves are locked in their cages, they witness a man named John screaming in agony. He had been branded on his cheek with a hot iron. Seeing this, Thomas, another young slave, trembles in fear. Peter comforts him, telling him to think of his family. He reminds him of God's word and assures him that the Lord will protect them. But John says,
Where is he? Stand up. Stand up. Go, stand up. Stand up and praise your God for all he has done for you.
His voice is filled with bitterness. Peter doesn't argue. He simply remains silent. Then softly promises John, I'll pray for you too. A little while later, Peter overhears the guards talking. He learns that President Lincoln has freed the slaves, and many of them are escaping to Baton Rouge, where the Union Army is offering help. If the others can make it there, they'll be free. Before the conversation ends, the guards realize that Thomas has failed to cook proper food. They begin punishing him. Peter steps in to defend him. The guards feel insulted and prepare to shoot Peter, but Fassel stops them. Something about Peter's attitude stands out to him. Later, when Peter returns to his cage, Fassel looks him in the eyes and says, I am your God, and you are my dog. Peter calmly replies, then feed me like a dog. Give me meat. The next day, they chain Peter down and force him to kneel. Fassel's dog stands right beside him, almost ready to attack. In that moment, the dog locks onto Peter's scent. Later during lunch, Peter tells the other slaves about Lincoln's proclamation and Baton Rouge, where they could get help. He explains that to reach there, they'll have to cross through some swamps.
There are many ways to die in a swamp. There are many ways to die here.
Eventually, a few agree to escape. Now they just need the right moment to run. One day, while working, a slave dies. The guards order Peter to drag the body to a mass burial pit where the corpses of other slaves lie. The dead are not buried. They're burned with chemicals. Some white workers nearby refuse to do it, saying it's the job of a black man because the smell is unbearable. They hand Peter a shovel and force him to do it. As Peter begins pouring the chemicals, he realizes this is the perfect moment to escape. Also, explosions from the construction often happen in the distance, and Peter waits for the next one to distract the guards. The moment the blast goes off, Peter attacks the guards, kills a few of them, and before escaping, steals a knife. Seeing this, other slaves also fight back. John grabs a guard's gun and runs. Chaos breaks out and the guards sound the alarm and open fire. Many slaves are killed, and some flee into the woods. Then Fassel joins the chase and he fires at Peter, but Peter narrowly escapes. Fassel sends out more men and releases the dogs to hunt them. Here, Peter and his companions manage to find the swamp path and begin their journey into the marshes. But Thomas, terrified by the sight of an alligator, panics and refuses to enter. Just then, Fassel's dogs finds Thomas and attacks him, leaving him badly injured. After Peter and his companions escape the swamp path, Fassel arrives and demands to know the location of Peter, but Thomas refuses to say a word. Then Fassel promises to spare his life if he gives up the others. Thomas replies, "All I know is I have to go into the swamp." As he turns toward the swamp, Fassel shoots him from behind. Meanwhile, Peter, John, and Gordon safely make it through the swamp. Peter says they now need to cross another swamp to continue onward.
Not my master.
Then he leaves in a different direction. Here, Gordon chooses to stay with Peter, but Peter worries that if they all split up, it'll be harder for the hunters to track them. Then Peter reminds Gordon to follow the sound of Lincoln's cannons. And with that, Gordon sets off into the jungle to find his own path. Now Peter had to find his path alone. But the worst part, he had been shot in the leg by Fassel. If he didn't stop the bleeding soon, the dogs would catch his scent. To get ahead of Fassel and his men, Peter had to run far. After a while, he comes across a white family's property, where slaves also work. Peter quickly wraps a vine around his wound to stop the bleeding, then hides behind a pile of firewood. There, he finds drinking water and sees clothes hanging on a line. Taking a big risk, he steals a cloth. But as he runs, the young girl from the house spots him and rings a bell to raise the alarm. Hearing the bell, Fassel arrives. The girl points toward the woods, and Fassel begins chasing Peter again. Peter runs as fast as he can. Then he stops briefly to tie the cloth around his wound. He tears off a piece of the cloth and hides it in the forest, so the dogs will be misled. Then he hides inside a nearby pond. Here, Fassel and his men fall for the trick. They believe Peter has crossed the pond and turned back. Once they're gone, Peter climbs out of the water. Suddenly, an alligator attacks. Peter shoves it away with a branch, then stabs it with his knife, killing it. At that same time, here Peter's wife, Dodienne, wakes up from a nightmare. She feels that Peter is in danger. Her children wake up too, worried about their father. But Dodienne reassures them, "He'll be back soon. Your father is brave. He can face anything." That night, Peter hides in a tree, pulling out his knife to remove the leeches and parasites that had clung to him in the swamp. But his blood drips onto the plants below. Meanwhile, Fassel's group discovers the dead alligator, and they realize Peter is still alive and had escaped from this very spot. They camp for the night and roast the alligator. One of the men, Rington, praises Peter, calling him fearless, but Fassel snaps, shouting at him. Fassel says,
First they eat our food, then they'll take our jobs, and then they'll steal our land. We give the niggers so much as a crumb, they're going to take over the whole damn country.
The next morning, Peter moves slowly through the forest. He covers his body in mud and animal waste to mask his scent and avoid being stung by the swarm of bees above him. He now faces another swamp. Before entering, he thinks of his family and prays for courage. The sun suddenly breaks through the clouds. Peter takes it as a sign and begins to move forward again. Meanwhile, Fassel splits his men into separate groups to track Peter more efficiently. Here, Peter comes across a treehouse and climbs up. Inside, he finds some food, clean water, and hot coals. He heats his knife over the embers to treat his wound. Then he loads the burning coals into a bucket and climbs higher into the tree, toward a beehive. The smoke drives the bees away, and Peter collects the honey. But the smoke also alerts Fassel, who starts riding in Peter's direction. Just then, Peter spots a boat near the treehouse, with a snake hidden inside. Using a stick, he drives the snake out, climbs into the boat, and sails away, licking the honey from his fingers as he escapes once again. We now return to Dodienne, Peter's wife. Her master informs her that she's been sold to a new owner, someone who will come to take her in 2 days.
Yeah, children ain't going. Mr. Fabian said he has you a new husband.
But Dodienne is devastated by the news. She doesn't want to leave. She wants to stay right there waiting for Peter to come back. So, she makes a heartbreaking decision. She walks to a cotton processing machine, places her hand inside, and horribly injures herself, all while pretending it was an accident. Meanwhile, Fassel's dog picks up Peter's blood scent near the treehouse. The dog leads the hunters directly to the spot, giving them Peter's location just before he can cross the river. Peter, still deep in the woods, continues his journey. That's when he runs into John, but John isn't happy to see him. He's afraid. He knows that if Peter is nearby, Fassel and his men won't be far behind. Peter tells him, "They're not tracking me anymore." He even shares how to mask his scent, but John doesn't want to hear any advice. He refuses to take orders from Peter. Just then, they both hear the dogs barking in the distance. Peter quickly hides inside the hollow of a dead tree. John climbs up a tall tree, but since John didn't mask his scent, the dogs find him. Fassel's men arrive and demand he come down. John refuses to surrender, so Fassel shoots him down from the tree.
Where's your friend?
But even in death, John tells him nothing. Then Fassel orders his men to cut off John's head and give it to Rington, so they can hang it outside the main gate as a warning to other slaves about what happens when they try to escape. But Peter, watching from a distance, can't bear to see his friend killed. He closes his eyes and silently prays for John's soul. Long after Fassel and his men leave and it begins to rain, only then does Peter come out of hiding to see what they had done to John. When he sees John's body, his soul trembles. The pain is too much to bear, and with that weight in his heart, Peter walks deep into the distance, carrying the grief with every step. Suddenly, Peter saw horses racing through the woods, one of them completely engulfed in flames. He immediately began heading in the direction they had come from. Not far ahead, he discovered a house on fire. A white family had lived there, but now they were all dead. It looked like one of the slaves held captive in that house had heard about Lincoln's proclamation and, in a final act of rebellion, killed the family and set everything ablaze. Then Peter drew his knife and slowly stepped into the burning house, checking every room one by one. When he reached the dining room, he saw a full meal laid out on the table. But just then, he heard a faint sound. Someone was still alive. Following the noise, Peter found a young girl pinned beneath broken furniture. She was barely breathing. He pulled her out and carried her outside, trying his best to keep her alive. As she gasped for air, she clutched the cross pendant around her neck and held it up toward Peter. He understood. She was asking for a prayer. But as Peter leaned over to help her, he failed to notice the danger creeping up behind him. Harrington had arrived, and he was aiming a gun straight at Peter. He ordered Peter to drop the knife and step away from the girl. Peter obeyed, but it was too late. The girl took her final breath and died in Peter's arms. Her death triggered something inside him. With quiet fury, Peter picked up the same cross pendant and used it to kill Harrington on the spot. At that very moment, Knowles entered the scene. Without hesitating, Peter grabbed Harrington's rifle and fired, wounding Knowles. Injured and scared, Knowles began pleading for his life. He tried to manipulate Peter, saying, "A man who can kill an alligator, Fassel would make you a commander in his army." But Peter looked him dead in the eye and killed him instantly. The sound of barking dogs rang out in the distance. Fassel was closing in, so Peter ran and hid in the fields nearby. When Fassel's dog tracked him down, Peter calmly raised his weapon and shot the animal dead. The next morning, Peter reaches a beach, and the sight before him is haunting. The sand is covered with bodies of white soldiers, all killed by Lincoln's Union Army, who had come to rescue enslaved people. But the battlefield is now silent. No one is around. Peter walks further and suddenly hears the distant sound of cannons. He rushes forward and finally sees them, Union warships approaching the coast. Peter realizes that Lincoln's army is close. Overwhelmed by hope and the thought of freedom, he begins to run. But just as freedom is in sight, Fassel attacks him from behind.
Humble down.
Fassel offers Peter a piece of meat, the same thing Peter had once sarcastically asked for when he was caged. He tells Peter to beg for it, but Peter refuses. Then Fassel points his gun at him and says,
I told you I was your god.
Just as he's about to pull the trigger, a Union soldier shoots Fassel from a distance, saving Peter's life. Peter looks down at Fassel's lifeless body and says,
You are not my god.
The soldiers take Peter to their military camp. His leg wound had become infected from the bullet, and days of wandering in the swamp had left him weak and exhausted. He receives treatment over the next few days. While lying in bed, Peter's thoughts constantly return to his family. Once he recovers, he asks one of the soldiers for permission to go and find them.
Peter.
Age?
But as a former slave, Peter has no ID, no documents, not even a birth record. He doesn't even know how old he is. The soldier refuses his request. At the time, enslaved people didn't legally exist without documentation, and many soldiers took advantage of that. The man tells Peter he has two options: work in the fields or join the army. Peter refuses at first, but when the soldier explains that by joining the Union Army, he'll have a better chance of protecting his family and fighting for true freedom, so Peter agrees. Later, Peter learns that the army had found Gordon. He was wounded, but alive. Still, the loss of John, heavily on Peter's heart. When Peter goes to receive his uniform, a group of men approaches him. They want to take his photograph. Seeing white men again makes Peter uneasy, but his comrade assures him they're the good kind. These were photographers who wanted to expose the truth of slavery to the world. They ask Peter to remove his shirt and show his back. There, across his skin, are hundreds of scars from brutal whippings, marks of the torture he endured as a slave. After the photograph, Peter is taken to meet a Union general, who begins questioning him about railroad lines and enemy buildings. Peter provides all the information he can. The general then looks at Peter's photo and says coldly, "Those marks, they mean you don't follow orders. That's not what makes a good soldier." Listening this, Peter is hurt by the comment. His friend tries to lead him away, but Peter turns and calmly replies,
They beat me. They whip me. They string me up. They sell me. But they never break me.
The next morning, Captain Kellogg leads Peter and his fellow soldiers toward a deep trench, the battlefield where the next brutal fight is about to begin. Standing before them, he delivers a powerful, passionate speech. With renewed spirit, the men begin their march forward. As they advance, enemy shells rain down from above. Many soldiers fall, injured or dead, but the survivors keep marching. their determination doesn't waver. The fire in their hearts refuses to die. They press on until they're thrown directly into the chaos of war. Gunfire erupts from all sides. A massive explosion knocks Peter unconscious. Around him, several soldiers are killed in the blast. When Peter regains consciousness, he's dazed, wounded, but not broken. With sheer will, he drags his injured body through the mud and toward the fight. Soon after, Peter watches in horror as his friend Gordon is shot and badly wounded. The pain on Gordon's face sparks something inside Peter. His grief turns into rage. Fueled by emotion, Peter leaps out of cover and charges toward the enemy lines. His goal, silence the cannons, cut off the source of destruction. Inspired by his courage, the other soldiers follow him. Together, they launch a bold counterattack, pushing through the battlefield with everything they have. Bullet by bullet, they crush the enemy. And finally, they win. After the battle, the Union forces move across the region, liberating plantations one by one. Everywhere they go, they free enslaved people, announcing that the war had brought their long-awaited freedom. Then Peter returns to the same cotton field where his family had once worked. News of freedom spreads quickly, and the people break into tears of joy. Now free, Peter begins searching for his family. At first, he doesn't see them. He stands quietly and prays. Then, at last, he sees them. They rush into his arms. This story is based on true events. In the final moments of the film, we see the real photograph of Peter, the one that shocked the world. The scars on his back, from hundreds of lashes, became one of the most iconic images of American slavery. At the time, nearly 400,000 black people were still enslaved in the South. But because of brave men like Peter and a war that refused to be silenced, they were finally set free.